Hi, I'm Lucas Johnson.
And I'm Catherine Oakes.
And this is 2 Cents and Nonsense.
A place where we give our 2 cents on mortgage trends and money habits.
And share hot takes on hot topics. Episode 2. All right, so what are our topics for today?
Well, today we're going to talk about something pretty hefty, which is credit scores. That's going to be our 2 cents for the day, but you're going to get a little bit more than 2 cents.
Yeah, there's a lot that has to do with credit. And it's a shame that they don't ever teach you about credit in school. I think they're starting to a little bit now, but they do the Dave Ramsey thing where he just says credit is
or do young people just have access to other sources of information outside of school so they are educating themselves?
Well, I just feel like what would you benefit more from? A lesson on parallelograms or a lesson on here's a credit score and why it's important and how it works and all that? I would say it's more useful.
You mean that they have this matching sides?
I don't.
Like a square is a parallelogram?
Yeah, but a parallelogram's not a square. I don't know.
What?
I don't know. I just feel like they don't teach you
yeah.
in the current education system. They don't teach you like money stuff. They don't teach you how to run a budget. I think they're starting to now because they're realizing how like inept people are once they get out of college and go, oh, no, I have to do all this stuff and learn it on my own. I learned a lot of it on YouTube, but when I was in there, we did econ and maybe touched on it for like maybe a couple classes, but no one talks about credit. They might do a little bit of budgeting, but no one talks about credit, how to use it, what it's important for, how does it help.
I feel like adults in general, no shade, can often also get by decades into their adulthood by not knowing these same things. So for us to be teachers of it to the next generation, we have to
it makes your life
suck it up and learn
so much better. It makes it so much easier or cheaper.
Well, it also makes you feel less powerless because often, especially the younger generation, can feel like they're just victims of all the rules that seem to govern adulthood. And it's like, well, I mean, there are some rules that govern adulthood. And if you can just learn them and become knowledgeable about them, you don't have to feel like a victim and just like a robot in a system. You can understand it and make moves, make decisions that help you grow as a person and achieve your calling in life, you know?
No, absolutely. I think that's absolutely true. And you can start as early as 18. So why, if you can get credit or access to credit at 18, you might as well know how to use it so that you don't punish yourself and you can use it as a strategy to help build wealth or save yourself money long term.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into it because we have some fun nonsense coming as well.
Okay.
So Luke, what is a credit score?
So right now, it's basically just a score that is TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian put together that is based on the credit history of a person, and they use your social security number, and then they track how you've utilized credit to then give you a credit score that determines your credit worthiness as a borrower, so that other companies can make decisions on whether you're a good borrower or a bad borrower. And so the three main ones we use is TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian are the three bureaus that we pull from. As a mortgage broker, we always take the middle score, but it's extremely important because it tells you like how much your interest rate's going to be, because usually there's a range, and the higher risk you are as a borrower, as far as how low your score is, typically your interest rate is going to be much higher than if you are a credit-worthy borrower, and they go, okay, this is less risky that we're going to be given money. And it's the same thing with credit cards, with car loans, any type of access to credit. They're going to look at they're going to look at your credit score to see how credit worthy you are, because it is a good picture of who you are as a borrower for the most part, unless something fraudulent comes on your report. Yeah. But most of the time, you can look at someone's credit report and it is a fair assessment of, are they good at handling their finances and credit in general.
Yeah. And just to go into emotions-based conversation for a minute, I don't want people to view their credit scores as the be-all, end-all of the value of them as a human being.
Well, of course not.
It's not an inaccurate indicator of how you've handled credit and money in the past and a predictor of how you might handle credit and money in the future. Mm-hmm. However, at the end of the day, it is a tool.
Yeah.
And tools work better when we learn how to master them.
Yeah, like it's kind of like how the ACT score is not necessarily an indicator of how good or bad
but I
be in college, but it does tell you something.
40s, Lucas Johnson will ask you,
what was your ACT score? Yeah. My wife was always like, I'm a bad test taker. And I go, so you're bad at the part where you have to regurgitate the information you learned? And she goes, no, it's just the pressure of me having to do it at that moment. And she's so smart and awesome, but anytime the pressure is on, that's where she belts. So like when we play putt putt, she'll be beating me, and then about hole 4 or 5, I'll start talking a little trash, and then she just falls apart and then gets so upset.
Well, I feel
and
like
it makes
it's
me
not
laugh so
it's
hard.
not like the pinnacle of education to be a good test taker either, because I feel like I would call myself a good test taker, and yet I have an amazing ability to walk out of test and be like, yeah, I feel like that was an A, least of all a B. And then
Yeah.
like the very next day, like, hey, Catherine, what are the digits of pi? And I'm like, nope.
I don't know. Yeah, it just goes
Done.
in one ear and out the
I
other.
got my A, I got
couldn't
my B, I
regurgitate
moved
it.
on.
Well, I think that's another big problem, and I know we're railing on the education system, but in general, I feel like when you get out into the real world or the business world in general, there's no one right answer. There's usually a problem and trade-offs and like 7 different ways to do something, and one
Right.
way will be more efficient than the other. So being able to regurgitate information or get to one answer, I don't think is necessarily a predictor of success.
Not near as valuable
success.
as just learning how to adapt, problem solve.
Yes,
and
more than anything.
use tools that you have.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So is any credit score too far gone?
No, the more you've wrecked your credit by, it makes it harder for you to get back to a good score, but it's not impossible. Usually within 6 months to a year, even in like the worst predicaments, you can usually get back to like a fairly average credit score. And
Yeah.
then after 2 years, they're not going to take that really into consideration.
Just takes
So,
a little bit more intentional
more time.
actions and
Yeah.
a little bit more time.
yeah, because the way it works when determining it, so like let's say you had missed a payment and you're 30 days late, and that hits in February. So it hurts you the most immediately in March. But then every month after that, if you've paid it back to where it's no longer late anymore, and it kind of cures the 30-day late payment,
Yeah.
the more time between when you initially did it and current date, that's when you start to see your score start to creep
payments
back
fall
up.
off after 7 years.
7 years, yeah, but they start to hurt you less after like 6 months,
Yeah,
a year, 2
yeah.
years. So
What is a good credit score?
depends on what type of loan you're getting, especially for mortgage. In our world, you usually want to be at least 620 plus for your middle score. If you're trying to buy a house, there's several options where the interest rate's not going to be too bad, whether it's FHA or USDA loans. But for the most part, what I would say if somebody's a good creditworthy borrower for conventional or like your typical one is going to be 720 plus, and then 740 plus for us is basically like everything above that is gravy as far as your borrower. And then if you like are in the 1%, you're like 800. And when I have several people will be like, it's 800, right? Because that's like, they take pride in that. And so I've seen like 805s and stuff like that. But that's the
And you
people
just,
that have
like,
had trade lines over
cry
forever.
one silent,
little beautiful
holy
tear. Where
tear.
you're just like, oh, this is going to be
It's the
easy.
only time he's silent in the office.
Yeah.
Okay, so touch on real quick though, mortgage products for people who may have a score lower than a 620. Is that just a don't buy?
There are some available. The interest rates, the hit starts to be pretty significant. It makes it very challenging. So I typically am like, you want to stay in that range of 620 plus. So I'll coach people on what to do to get their score to that range. We can do it. I have closed some before where it's going to be
Yeah.
challenging. But a lot of times it's funny because they'll be like, yeah, you can do 580, but you can't have any late payments. And you go, well, then why would they 580 to begin with? In a certain window. So it's a very
You mean the
specific
underwriting requirements?
Yes, the very specific borrower that would fit into these boxes.
Yeah.
But typically over 620, you're pretty good to be able to get something.
Okay, so my interest rate as my credit score as a sliding scale is gonna be a large factor for determining my interest rate.
Correct.
So should I let my lower credit score dictate whether or not
buy
it's
it.
time to buy a home?
I think that's going to be dependent. No, so for me personally, I look at it like and I say this as a landlord, if I'm renting, I'm given and it depends on the situations because if it's short term versus long term, but if I'm going to be in a place for a while, I'd rather own the house so I can start building equity. What's really going to matter to me is the payment. Do I feel comfortable with the monthly payment at a fixed rate where it's not going to move on me unless it's just taxes and insurance increases? But I'm going to look at the payment and go, okay, at least I'm building up some stock of equity because generally houses appreciate 3% a year. I know that's been an anomaly the last couple of years where it's gone up, and sometimes it can go down. But typically that's what the appreciation for real estate has been historically. So I'm building equity, and then hopefully there's appreciation as icing on the cake and building wealth that way. So I'm going to look at the payment mostly to decide whether or not, versus versus whether or not my credit score is higher versus later. Because as long as I can start to build wealth early on through enough time, compound interest is going to be the determining factor. And so as long as I feel comfortable with the payment, I haven't gotten into something that's too high, or I'm going to feel like I'm house poor.
Exactly.
Then I would. I'm going to recommend buying houses, and that's what we've done the whole time, is continue to try to pick up real estate, because I think they did a study on it. Like, the number one indicator of whether or not someone is a millionaire at the end of their life is real estate, even more than stocks.
Yeah.
So that's the better place, the more, I think, stable place to park your money if you're going to want to try to build wealth versus renting.
So what could bring a quick increase to my score?
What I always tell coach everybody whenever I see it, typically there's 3 or 4 things that you would do. So number one, if you're wanting to get a quick boost on your score, you're probably going to want to make sure you're looking at all your credit cards that are maxed out, because they look at the utilization of the card. So you could have a card that's $200, and if it's maxed out at $200, and you have another card that's like $5,000 limit, and you have $1,000 on it, the second card is going to be better than the first card. So I would typically tell people, try to pay off as many of your credit cards as you can, and leave one with a small balance, less than 10% utilization. So that'll be the first thing. Number 2, I would check your credit report to see if there's any collections. Usually there's small medical collections that can make your score be lower, and it could be as small as like $50 to $100. And I would try to pay those off. They changed the rules in July last year to where if you pay it off, it has to fall off your credit like it never happened. Mm-hmm. And then if it's a non-medical collection, I would try to talk to the creditor and say, hey, will you write me a deletion letter if I pay this off and settle with you? And if they will, then great. If not, then I would tell them pay it off anyways, and then dispute it with the 3 credit bureaus, because it takes time. You might have to fight it a little bit, but eventually, usually it'll fall off. So those are the typical things. Honestly, if you're late 30 days, you're going to have to pay that up to current as well, as another thing. But those are the main 3 items. And then sometimes people, they only have installment loans, like car payments that are fixed, that don't change.
Yeah.
And those don't impact your score as much as like a revolving credit would be. So I might even tell somebody, hey, go ahead and open up a credit card and keep a small balance, and don't get one with a huge credit limit. But if you can open up that one card, they want to see how you deal with revolving credit, where where it goes up and down versus just the installment loans. So you see very violent swings in credit scores with revolving credit than you do with installment. It might go up 5 points if you continue to make your car payment on time, but it could swing 30, 40 points if you pay off all your credit cards.
Right.
Yeah. So they want to see how you handle that.
Yeah. So what would hurt a credit score the most?
So it's going to hurt your credit score the most is if you're behind on your payment more than 30 days. So they track on your credit cards or any credit line, they track whether you're 30, 60, 90 days late. So if you're delinquent 30 days and that hits your credit, that hurts. And then when it's 60, it hurts even more. And then when it's 90, it really hurts. So, and it's really hard to come back from that, or it takes a significant amount of time to heal the wound versus just some money at that point in time.
Yeah.
So that's going to be usually number 1 is going to be that. Obviously, if you file for bankruptcy or foreclose, that's another thing that can hurt you. But for the most part,
and also you can rebound from that with time.
Yeah, same thing, time.
Yeah,
and then mortgage lates are the hardest hits.
Yes.
Where if it's 100 points, it hits you.
And I want to say this too. I've seen that there's actually quite a few apartment communities out there that will report your rental history to your credit report, which is actually awesome, because that can help you build credit if you don't have a mortgage yet, and like it just gives another type of credit history for you. But that's also something to be incredibly aware of, because you may think, well, it's just rental history, it's not a mortgage, it's not gonna hurt a ton. But if they see a late on that too, they're using that as prediction, or when I say the mortgage underwriters, to say, hey, you struggle to pay your rent on time, how can I expect you to pay a mortgage on time? Yeah,
pay your bills. If you pay and you haven't maxed everything out, then you're usually going to have a 7-something credit score.
Okay, last little bit of 2 cents. It's a combo question. How early should I build my credit, and how do I build credit if I don't have a score at all?
So
Because people aren't born with a score.
It's true. You're not born with a score. My parents I got started at 18 when my parents put me as an authorized user on one of their cards to help start me off and build my credit. So by the time that I was trying to get a car loan or
Yeah.
Any of that, I already had credit that was established for a really long period of time. So
I also got started at 18. I got a $500 limit credit card at my banking institution.
There you
so
go.
that way I could just easily transfer the payment from my checking account to,
were you responsible with it at that young age?
I
You were
was.
responsible.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started off incredibly responsible, and then I realized that I can be prone to make some poor money or credit decisions in social situations of all things. So I had to figure out where my boundaries are.
Well, like you're going to pick up the tab at restaurants or something?
No, like people saying, "Won't you co-sign for me? I don't have
The
enough."
violent,
credit."
your
And I'm
heart's
like,
too big, and you just go here, take my.
the opposite of the Grinch issue.
That's a better. That's a better issue.
I had to shrink my heart a little bit, and then my credit rebounded.
There you go. Well, yeah. So I would say 18 would be the earliest part because at some point in time you're going to want to utilize credit for whether you're buying a house or
Yeah.
you're buying a car or you're getting a credit card or something. So it's nice to have it in your back pocket. I know Dave Ramsey is not really for it, and I agree with him in most parts. You can really get yourself in trouble, especially with credit cards, because the interest rates are really high. But if you're responsible with it and you make sure your credit limits aren't that high to where you can't do that, utilizing it in a positive fashion is going to allow you to get the cheapest truck payment or the cheapest housing payment. It's going to be much more beneficial from a payment standpoint because the interest rate's going to be much lower, because the companies feel more comfortable with you because they've seen your track record of being able to handle money in your budget. So
well, then there's that tool that kind of comes with built-in responsibility that you recommend to a lot of people trying to build their credit.
the secure, are you talking about,
Yes.
yeah. So if you're trying to build it, the easiest way, or I would say the first way would be if you can get put on some, like if your parents are responsible and you know that there's a good credit line, you can be put on there as an authorized user. But if you're building it from scratch and that's not an option, then my recommendation is to go get a secured credit card. You can usually get that at any bank that you're banking at. If not, there's online accounts. I always tell people go to Open Sky credit card, and we can link that to get your secured credit card. It's not the best credit card, but it goes on your credit the fastest to build. It's usually about 15 days.
And explain what a secured credit card is.
The way it works is you give them $200, they give you a card with a $200 limit on it. And so that way it establishes, they don't even have to pull your credit for it because it's backed by the money that you've given to them.
Backed by
So even
you.
if you default on it, they're going to be
You're
fine.
defaulting on yourself.
Yeah. It's not like a regular credit card where they're just taking a chance and then it'll go to collections and charge-offs and that type of thing. So you just utilize it, keep it at the lowest amount that you can, and that'll help start building your credit. And it goes on there in 15 days. And typically, when you don't have credit, if it's 6 months, after 6 months, that's when your credit score will appear. So the earliest that you could do that, if you did it at 18, you're 18 and a half, you'll have a score. And typically, it starts out like 704, somewhere in that like range-ish, like 700 to 710. And then it just builds over time the more that you use it and are responsible and pay it off. But I wouldn't pay it all the way off. I'd keep a balance, like a very small one, just to show that you are using the card. Because if you open a card and then never leave a balance on there, because when it reports once a month. So if you only do it, like if you use it and then pay it off immediately and it reports $0 balance, they can't see that you're using the money to begin with. And that doesn't have as good of an impact on your score. So, so I would build it with secured credit cards. And I would typically say the best way to do it would be to open up one and then open up one other one. And you want to have maybe 2 to 3 trade lines that are opened. And after a year, you're going to be somewhere in the 770s if you're responsible.
Very close to that tier moment, but not quite.
Not
Give
quite.
it a little bit more time.
It takes time, but yeah. So that's what I would do.
Okay. Well, let's move on to some nonsense.
Good.
Okay. So nonsense today.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about AI.
This conversation, I mean,
artificial intelligence.
I've had this conversation
for those
with like 1,000
who don't
people,
know
'cause
that
it's
abbreviation.
the most interesting thing in the world.
Yeah. Where are we headed? What does the future hold?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it open-ended like that, I think, because I think it needs to be open-ended.
Because I know I've bored you to death with the amount of stuff that I've talked about.
I'm interested in it, too, because I am, what interests me specifically about it is I'm very much a future thinker. And not to frighten anybody, but also to frighten people. I was a person that when I read the Hunger Games trilogy books, my mind just said, yeah.
Really?
This is where we're going.
That is not at all. I thought.
Not at all surprised to me.
It surprises me that you would
Granted,
say that.
I feel like my father did a really good job at queuing me up to anticipate this type of a future unfolding.
I might be cynical, but my view of teenagers saving the world, those type of movies, I was just like, come on. I don't.
You're taking away like the positive ending. I'm talking about the whole framework of where society devolved into a situation that we were volunteering, young children.
Yeah, that wouldn't happen.
to buy.
And especially, and then them saving the world at 18 or 19. I remember me at 18 and 19. I wasn't going to save anything. If anything, I had, you don't have any world experience. You've never run anything. So watching these movies where these young people are like saving the day for all the adults and everything, it's hard for me to wrap my brain around it.
I don't know. I don't want to think too highly of myself to say that I would be able to defend myself physically to that level or to attack people physically at that level. But I like to think I have a really good crisis instinct.
At 17, you think, or how old was Kat?
No, like somebody specifically.
At 18, you think you could be a general in a war?
No, someone specifically asked me recently, if you saw yourself in the Hunger Games, what type of a player do you think you would be? Like, what would be your thing? And I said, I think my thing would be hiding.
Yeah, the little.
And I'm not ashamed to say that.
That's funny.
That is a totally appropriate survival strategy.
No, that's smarter. That's a smarter strategy.
So,
anyways, I
think I could do decently from that front. So, getting us back on the topic of AI.
Yeah, so I'd been hearing about AI for a couple of years and watching the little clips of, it's coming, but I never really was like,
it was there. It's been a part of our society for a hot minute.
Yeah, but have you ever talked to Siri before? And then it's like she can't really understand you that well. She's not that. I mean, I was never that impressed with those kind of assistants where you ask them to do something.
Sure.
Unless it's like to tell me the weather. Or
not impressed, but at the same time, like jumping from that technology to what we see coming in the near future didn't ever seem like too much of a stretch to my brain. Like they're asking you to ask Alexa to tell jokes and such. So
yeah, but I always thought they were just pre-programmed jokes that were in there, and there was only like 10 of them. I was never that impressed with Siri. I was never like, oh wow, this is Terminator, they're coming for us. And then on November, when they released Chat GPT, which I'm sure a bunch of people have talked about by now, but if you go to openai.com and try out the artificial intelligence that just got released last year, you start to ask it questions, and I go, oh my gosh, the machines are coming, and Terminator 3 is just around the corner. I mean, you can ask it literally any question, and especially as a student, you can ask it to write you an essay on any topic.
Whoa.
What?
We don't vouch for that.
I mean, it's a tool that's going to be utilized.
You can use it as inspiration for your essay topics.
Oh, yeah. So for me, I have a hard time. It's funny, because you can ask it any question, and it's going to give you a response back. Yeah. And you can ask it to write you a report. You can ask it to do it in a different type of style. You can ask it, for example, if you wanted to say, hey, create me even a photograph or a picture, a stock image of a man on a beach smoking a cigar with a dragon in the background and he's, got gold in his hand. You could sell it to do that. It will generate. Is that
what you specifically asked?
No, I'm just coming up with an example. But let's just say you asked it that. It could come up with an image, and you can ask for 10 of those images, and it can make 10 of those images. And then you can be like,
or you could say, like, make it nighttime.
Yeah.
And add in little alterations.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can say, do it in the style of, an artist, and it will do it in that style. Yeah. And you just go, wow, if it can do that, and then it can write me papers on any topic, and it's accurate. That's what's crazy, is like I'm reading it, and it's perfect grammar. Yeah. It's written as if somebody that's smart wrote it.
Yeah.
It's definitely could pass the test. And so
we have leveraged it a lot from the perspective of our lending team together. Yeah. We've used it for social media inspiration. We've used it for social media scripts. We've used it for like email templates, like how to ask people this, how to do this.
Create presentations.
Exactly.
It's just so watching that tool, and you can say, hey, write me a snarky email to a coworker to tell him to stay out of my business. And it'll do it in the tone of being snarky, which I just think.
Did you know that's what I asked it to do?
That's funny. I'm sure some of your strongly worded emails are like that. But even so, like the other day, I know it was somebody's birthday that I knew, but I didn't know that well. Where it's like, okay, so I got
level.
Yeah, so I got a card, and I'm not like a super emotional guy in general. So me trying to write things under happy birthday sometimes can be a challenge.
Did you go into?
So I went there and write me a happy birthday message to
as if I had emotions.
And it spit it back out to me, because I always get writer's block, and I don't want to write happy birthday. I hope you have a good day, Luke. And then it spit me out something where it made me look good, and I'm like, wrote that down.
I got a very specific gift one time that I'm like, this requires a very heartfelt thank you, which of course I was filled with thankfulness, so that wasn't crazy, but it was like, I'm going to do justice in written form to thank this person. And I used ChatGPT because I was like, okay, it was handmade and it was Christmas and,
Yeah.
and it like touched on all those things.
So then I just went around the rabbit hole and just started watching a bunch of YouTube videos on it. And I've seen what
How they've maxed it out.
yeah, where the Google Assistant will add, like, there's a video of it from I think it was 18, where they're scheduling an appointment, a hair appointment for somebody, and it's just the assistant, and when it's talking back and forth, it's talking like a human. So when you go, hey, I'd like to schedule an appointment for such and such, and then the human responds and says, yeah, so we got these time slots available, and the robot goes, huh. Okay, I think 10:30 is going to, and is pausing and doing like your normal cadences of a human and adding that in, and you can't even tell, or it's indistinguishable.
So that starts
to me as a salesperson,
yeah.
I'm going, if you can teach this robot to listen to 10,000 sales calls and it learns exactly what works the most to close the sales, and then it's just a matter of time before my job becomes obsolete, and then everybody's job. Because copywriters, why would you pay a copywriter when I can click through, ask it to write me something, and then it's going to generate it for me? So much job loss is going to happen from this, and it's interesting because we always thought that the robots would come and take maybe blue collar jobs and stuff like that. But those are the ones that are
going to be insulated. Yeah.
The ones that are not going to survive are the white collar jobs, which is or the creative ones, because
the creatives I think will go first.
Yeah, because it'll make it harder, especially if they can generate images. If they can generate images, then they can generate video. So essentially, if you can say, hey, robot, create me the ultimate social media star and make me a video and talk about these topics.
I think
it should be able to do that and then get the most views and become viral. So it's like you're downloading Mr. Beast's brain into a computer.
I think digital creative is going to go first. I think that there's some creative arts that aren't digital, they're physical, and like AI is not going to be able to touch, somebody who specifically paints paintings themselves and sells one of a kind pieces. AI is a little bit more geared towards, can I do something in mass? Can I do something from a graphic design perspective? And I'm even thinking like pottery or like professional dancers and stuff.
But it could probably counterfeit some modern art real quick right now, because I think modern art is kind of, for the most part, I don't.
Maybe digitally.
They're tricking people into what?
Maybe digitally.
Yeah.
But like.
That's where I go. And then you go,
oil paintings with actual texture on it. Like, that's safe.
But then a program, so it writes code immaculately too. So like this whole time we've been talking about learn how to code, but if it can write code appropriately, you just need to be able to do the commands, then it's going to take a lot of coding people's jobs.
Yeah.
So I just look at the robot and I just see that coming, and it was just 2004 when we had Nokia phones, and now I can literally do anything I want to on my phone that you could do on a laptop. So I just think about in 20 years what that technology will look like.
I want to ask you about the sales thing. So I was thinking about this too, and I was like, I see where you're coming from, that if AI is able to determine what phrases, what scripts lead to being able to convert to sales or convert to having like any human,
how to handle objections,
and like end up doing the action that you're desiring, essentially. But like, where does nuance come into play? Where we are not robots, and so the scripts that would cause you to buy a car are not the same scripts that would cause me to buy a car.
But if I'm a robot and I go and I can pull your information, so let's say when you look at ads, right?
Yeah.
Right now, Facebook, or at least before Apple changed it, they can go, all right, you're 30, you're between this demographic age-wise. These are your political, because they're looking at what you search. So these are what your belief systems are. This is your social.
Gender,
so if they can typecast what you are as a prospect and then sell to you based on that, they would know which scripts are going to work.
Am I that solvable?
Yeah, I think I'd like to think that I'm not, but at the same time, if they're looking at everything, like they have like a window to my brain based on what I've been purchasing, where I live, all of these different demographics. That's how they've been able to sell so efficiently. Now, that's why tech companies are at
Counterpoint
the top,
then. What about the people in the world that have distanced themselves from technology as much as possible? Are they safer from all of this?
I think they would be safer in general, but if everybody has the tool to generate that, then it's going to be very hard to compete in the global society. I mean, think about it. Even how it would affect relationships. They had an AI or a programmer programmed an AI to watch all the James Bond movies, and then he wrote another program to match with 5,000 girls on Tinder, and then he had the program hit on all 5,000 of them, and then it set 4,000 dates. So that in
Okay,
and of
fine.
itself
I
is very
am that solvable, I guess.
no, but that just to me is like, and this is the first iteration. So think about 20 years from now,
Did
what this
4,000
technology.
women show up to a restaurant where there was no person sitting there?
I don't know. I don't know. I think it just
I
agreed.
need to know the ending.
Yeah,
of that.
I don't know the ending of the
Really
story.
distressed.
I just heard that and I just go, if that's possible, then the sales thing is possible.
The nuance
And then
is
eventually,
achievable,
if you
yeah.
think about it, when they put that AI, I saw the new Tesla bot that they came out with, and it's just a straight up robot, and it's the first iteration, but 10 iterations from now, it'll be a person, or it'll look very similar to a person. If they can take that and put it in the brain,
Terrifying.
it is terrifying to think like how many we're going to have a robot. Yay, they become the maid or da da da. But then you're leading straight to Terminator, where they take over. Because I mean, eventually you should be able to write a code that just basically states something like, create me a business that makes over $2 million a year. And it writes the scripts of the videos, does like, creates the channels, reaches out to the vendors,
Where
puts
do
the
you think
landing page
we-
online, does all those
Where do
different
you think
things
we
that would do it.
go as a society, though, when you can't claim your success as a result of your own genius or hard work?
I think you become, it's funny
Then
because
success
technology,
is no longer a indicator.
its technology is interesting though, because if you think about it, we are the most hyper efficient society that there's probably ever been, but probably individually not like very dumb compared to previous generation. I watch some, or I'll
I
read.
think that's true.
I'll read people that have written stuff like 100 years ago, or even like the founding fathers writing, and you're reading it, and I'm like, wow, I'm stupid. I'm having to read this 3 or 4 times to even understand what they're saying and like
Yeah.
the flowery language and how they put together sentences and thoughts and logic. And so I feel like on the one hand, technology dumbs you down in one sense, but in the other sense, it's like, I mean, we're the most. I mean, I can know anything that I want to by Googling it in 2 seconds.
So it's
and
almost
having
like we're
access to
going to
the
move
information.
faster, but the quality won't be there.
Yeah,
We'll
maybe
all
it'll
be
just
able to
feel
achieve
it'll
things
feel more
faster.
it'll feel more empty. That's why I don't think you could probably derive meaning from it. And
Yeah.
I don't want to get like you can get real hype, religious or spiritual with that, but if you derive meaning from this type of society and don't have like personal meaning or whatever,
Yeah.
it's gonna make you feel very empty.
No, I think that's really true. I think like looking forward towards a AI heavy future, having personal foundation
Yeah.
to ground yourself in is 12 times as important or more,
Yeah.
because you'll either grow overly critical of it where you're just like, oh, this is all nonsense
Yeah.
and like it, or evil. This is all evil.
Yeah.
And so we should stay away from it completely and not embrace any of these
I
tools.
definitely think there's going to have to be some
Or-
tool or regulation
Or
on
you
it.
lean towards too much leverage, too much reliance upon it, that you forget to develop yourself as an individual.
And then we become
for
Wall-E.
the sake of, I've never seen that.
You never seen Wall-E? They're in a ship and
I
like
hear
the
it's
robot butlers
life-changing,
take care
though.
of you, and they're just like lazy and
Yeah.
don't do anything, and they just sit in these chairs and stare at TVs all
Yeah.
day, which we're maybe halfway there, but not fully.
Okay, so I have a final thing to touch on then, because we went into this and then didn't go all the way into it. You mentioned like, oh yeah, Chat GPT has the capability of writing like an essay. So plagiarism. What is
Yeah.
that looking like
So
into our future?
what's funny, I saw an interesting article on this too. Well, what teachers are doing now is there's an AI software that can detect whether or not AI wrote it or if it was human intuition that wrote something.
Yeah.
So then what you would do is they take the paper and run it through. It used to be a system that would plagiarize and look at all the previous writings to see if you just copy and pasted. Now it can tell whether or not a robot wrote the paper or not. Of course, then after they did that, the students came up with a way to rearrange the sentences so that it would beat the test. So it's just a back and forth using AI to outsmart AI. I mean, it's just going to be. And so I thought that was hilarious. Where it's
Wow.
like, how can we cheat most efficiently now that they've come out with this software? And then I'm sure the teachers will come out with their version that can find it.
Yeah. Well, that scares me a little bit too. And it's beyond, I mean, of course, there's the principle of, I don't like cheating. We shouldn't be doing that. But beyond that, it moves into like, okay, if students can cheat the system that much, that deeply, that consistently, they really will graduate with no knowledge.
Yeah.
because they won't have
100%. You never had to critically
the
think.
only knowledge that they will walk away with is the ability to consistently cheat systems.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about it. Anytime that you learn or grow as a person, there's got to be some kind of resistance involved, whether you're trying to become, strong or smart or in any area, there's always got to be that resistance, and you continue to push through that journey. And once you do that over time, that builds your foundation of growth in whatever area that you're trying to grow in. If that's removed completely, then what does that leave you? It leaves you kind of
stagnant,
weak and stagnant, not able to grow as a person. So and it makes you more vapid. So I wonder what the society like 30 years from now, it's really going to be challenging, especially, I mean, the 3 little kids growing up in the system. I'm wondering what it's going to be like for them in 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah.
To see what it's like growing up in that culture. Because I think you're already seeing the effects of social media and what technology has done society on a whole. Where, I mean, I ask nieces and nephews, like, hey, you can hang out with your friends? And they're like, no, why would I hang out with my friends? I just hang out with them online. Play video games. And I'm like, so you don't like go out there and throw dirt clods at cars or, get into normal teenage trouble? And they're like, no, like we just talk to each other online and play video games. And I get that there's the camaraderie there, but I wonder if without having that social interaction to go back and forth in dating, you're swiping back and forth to try to choose people rather than like having to approach somebody and learn how to talk to them.
Yeah.
I do wonder what that impact would look like.
Well, and I want to say too, and we'll just kind of say this to wrap up, honestly, both topics, 2 cents and nonsense. We've talked a lot about like the next generation and the coming generation and ways we feel like they're being failed right now or they're not stepping up enough. Like,
or they're just going to have new challenges.
But I want to put a light on briefly the importance of our generation and older generations to take on that mantle with them and say, okay, if the education system is failing this new generation and this upcoming generation right now, then I need to step in my generation, our generation, our parents' generation, and fill that gap by imparting knowledge to people that we can impart knowledge to,
Yeah, it's just hard though, because if the computer can do it better than what,
AI cannot do relationships better than real relationships. I think we can land on that.
I agree with that right now. We'll see 30 years from now. It'll be very hard. I mean, if you can have a robot that's 6'4" and says everything right and does everything that you want to, I wonder what kind of person there might be. There's going to be a subsect of the population that would be like, yeah, I'd rather have that.
But that's my point. People may say they'd rather have that, and they may really mean that. They may really believe that. But you and I both know that's wrong, and they're getting the cheaper version.
I agree. Yeah. I agree 100%. But I do think it's a very interesting topic, and it'll be cool to see what happens in the future.
So be intentional about your credit. Stand on a firm foundation with the future of AI so that way you don't have to be intimidated by it.
Yeah.
And then you don't have to buy too much into it. And I think that's where we're landing.
And hopefully what happens is it doesn't do it and it's more of a letdown like crypto's been the last couple of years where it's just this new technology that we're all interested in and it ends up just being something that can write papers.
One can only hope.
One can only hope.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you want to weigh in on any of today's topics, find us on social media at Johnson Lending Team MN. That's team with 3 M's.
Or if you're ready to make a move, you can visit my website to fill out a mortgage application at www.movement.com/lucas.johnson.
If you've enjoyed or endured listening to us today, please leave us a review on whatever platform you use to stream.
For what it's worth, that was our 2 cents and nonsense.